In this lesson, we're going to review the process for installing a video adapter in a PC system. Now, remember, a dedicated video card is simply an expansion board. So, for a single video board configuration, the installation process really is just as simple as plugging a video board into an expansion slot on the motherboard. But before we do that, we first need to make sure that all the components that we want to install are actually compatible with each other, because sometimes they're not. For example, you may need to check and make sure that the video card that you want to install is compatible with the slots available in the motherboard. Also, you need to make sure that the video board meets the requirements of the end user. This is really important. For example, a productivity workstation, which is one that is used for word processing and spreadsheets and things like that, it doesn't require a lot of video board horsepower. On the other hand, a gaming system will need a really fast video board with a lot of video memory installed. Make sure you pick the right video board for the particular installation. Now, also understand that some higher-end video boards will require power directly from the power supply, but other lower-end video boards will get their power straight from the PCIe slot. You need to check your video board documentation and see what your particular video board requires. If it needs power directly from the power supply, then you need to make sure that the power supply has the appropriate type of connector available. Also, please be aware that the video board generates a lot of heat in the system, second only to the CPU itself. So you need to make sure that the system has adequate cooling capacity to keep everything from overheating. Now, the next thing you need to do is disable the onboard graphics on the motherboard. Now, nearly all modern motherboards include a very basic video adapter integrated into the motherboard hardware. Now, these integrated adapters provide adequate performance, but not really good performance. Generally speaking, a dedicated video board that's installed in an expansion slot will provide much better performance than the integrated video adapter on the motherboard. So, before we can install the video board in the slot and have it work, we need to go into the BIOS or the UEFI firmware configuration of the motherboard and then configure the motherboard to use the video board that we're going to install in the expansion slot instead of the integrated adapter. Now, there are several different settings that are usually available. It varies between motherboards. For example, most systems can be configured to use the integrated adapter on the motherboard only if a dedicated expansion board has not been installed in an expansion slot. And this is usually the best option to choose if it's provided in your motherboard's firmware configuration, because that means as long as the board is in the slot, it will use that board. But if that board is removed for some reason, then it will default back to using the integrated video adapter in the motherboard. However, please be aware that I've worked with some systems that allow you to completely disable the integrated video adapter. Now, this option works fine as long as you have a dedicated video board installed. The problem that I've seen is that if you take the video board out at some point, or if it fails for some reason, then you lose all of your video output and you can no longer access your BIOS or UEFI firmware configuration to re-enable the integrated adapter on the motherboard. Therefore, I recommend that you avoid this option if possible. So, with all this done, we're then ready to install a video card in the motherboard. Now, the video card we're using here is a PCI X16 card. Now, be aware that some motherboards actually have multiple PCIe slots. And if this is the case, you could, if you wanted to, actually install 2 or more video boards and link them together. And this can dramatically increase the performance of your video system. However, for our purposes here, we're going to just install a single video board in a single PCIe slot. So we're going to take the video board and we'll install it into the PCIe X16 slot just like this. And of course, we want to secure that board to the case using a screw. Now, the next step is to connect power to the video board if required. Now, for this particular video board, the power supplied through the expansion slot is sufficient, so we don't actually have to do anything else. However, please be aware that some video boards do require either a 6-pin or an 8-pin dedicated power connection from the power supply. So, with the video board installed, the next step is to connect the external display to the video board. Now, on this board, we can use one of several different connectors. We could use the DVI connector to connect it to a traditional monitor, or we could also use an HDMI connection to connect the video board to either a high-end monitor or even a TV set. So once all the hardware has been installed in the system, then the next step is to turn the computer on and make all the necessary configuration changes. The first thing you want to watch for is whether you get any output on the monitor at all. If you do, you're in good shape. If not, you might need to start troubleshooting connections and compatibility. Once we get the operating system loaded, then the next thing we need to do is install the appropriate video card driver. Now, usually you'll find a CD containing drivers that you can use in the box with the video board. And they're okay, but please be aware that these video drivers are usually way out of date. So a best practice is to load these drivers from the disk and then immediately go out to the video board manufacturer's website and then download and install the latest drivers. Now, most higher-end video cards also include several configuration utilities that should also be installed. And these are really useful. For example, you can use these to fine-tune the way the video card works and optimize the performance of the video card. For example, the configuration utility may allow you to configure the video board to support multiple monitors, such as extending or mirroring displays, or it may also allow you to rotate the display 90 degrees if that's the way you want it to look. That's it for this lesson. In this lesson, we talked about installing video boards. We talked about meeting hardware requirements. We talked about disabling the onboard video adapter on the motherboard. We talked about installing the video board and expansion slot, and then we talked about loading the video board drivers.